Only 7% of the UK population are privately educated. So why is it that 32% of UCL students are from private schools? I'm Maya Bowles, and today I want to know why people from state schools are underrepresented in higher education, what it's like to be a student from a state school at UCL, and what kind of work is being done to dismantle the socio-economic barriers to the UK's top universities.
Before I started university, I always considered myself to be quite privileged. I'm white and I haven't come from a disadvantaged background. But when I started at UCL, I felt really different from most other people. Even though 68% of students are supposedly from state schools, my experience definitely hasn't reflected that figure. As a fresher, I felt plunged into this weird world where having more than one house was normal. People's parents were bankers, lawyers, and diplomats. And everyone constantly asked me what school I went to. I spoke to Connor Rowson, an ex-UCL student who is now a credit trader at an investment bank, about his experience of coming to UCL from a state school in Bermondsey.
So when you started UCL, did you feel different from other people having come from a state school?
It was a bit of a shock, and people's sort of lifestyles in general, even away from school, you know, their sort of home lives and family lives in general. It was very different, and it was very easy to feel different at first. I lived at home my first year, actually, just because it was obviously expensive living in London. I was quite lucky. I had football and I had my friends there, and you bond with people in different ways. But you soon start to realize that, you know, it's not taking anything away from people at private schools. People still worked hard, and people are still, you know, have to be capable and smart. But I do think a lot less work has to be done. I don't know of anyone at private school that probably had to teach themselves the whole syllabus. I actually had one of my maths modules, I actually taught half of it to the class myself. So,
Well done.
Which, when I tell people again who went to private schools, they almost think I'm joking. But I think, especially when I moved out of home, like second and third year and stuff, and I sort of became closer to my friendship group at university from different backgrounds, my family thought I was getting posher because I probably was speaking a bit posher and less like South London, I guess. And obviously, I guess I was just doing things that maybe weren't normal where I was from, and, you know, being first generation of my family to go to university, generally speaking, everyone in my family is working class, has working class jobs. You know, so not getting told off or like ripped apart with my family for being posh, but kind of bantered for it. But then at the same time, when I then come back to university, I get bantered for being more common and not being posh at all. I hear people went to private school, like, if you don't get A stars and A's, you failed. At year 11 in my school, majority of people, if you get five A stars to C's, if you get five C's, then that's an achievement. And that's, you know, sort of, that is the benchmark. You see it on Ofsted reports when schools are advertising themselves, they'll say 60% of our students got 5 A stars to C's. Like, that's not what private schools would be saying. They'll be saying 95% of our students got A stars to A's and 70% went to Oxbridge. You know, I was also fortunate in the sense that the employer I work for now, at the time, they sort of had this program throughout sixth form, like an academy. So it's sort of like not an internship, but work experience. And they sort of put you in, you know, they come in and do workshops. I think at the time it was like 4 select schools in inner London. And I think now it's maybe grown to about 5 schools, and it's generally the same schools, and my school still being one. The idea being, you know, to give people in poor areas in London an opportunity to, like, the world of finance, I guess.
The recent exposure of class-based bullying at Durham University highlighted how toxic these elitist cultures within Russell Group universities can be. So, what work is being done to challenge this? I spoke to Tania Tang, co-founder of UCL's 93% Club, a society that is part of a nationwide network of groups within universities who seek to provide support for students from state schools. I asked Tania about her experiences of coming to UCL from a state school.
It was, I think, the Edinburgh branch of the 93% Club, because thankfully at UCL we've had nothing but positivity so far, but they just posted a graphic of statistics. So there are 68% of people, more or less, at a university that are state school educated, and there are 92% that are state educated and all, but only like 7% are judges, and I'm probably misquoting here, but like a very small amount are like the most popular professions like journalism, medicine, all of that. And then the comment section to just these statistics were like, for want of a better word, just vitriol from private school students. I'm not going to repeat them here because they're quite shocking, but just to give you an idea, someone said, if I were ill, I wouldn't want a doctor that came from a state school to treat me. Another one said that, what else would you expect? Because state schools are obviously underfunded and S-word. And that it just shows that if you don't want to send your child to a good secondary school, what else do you expect from them? Just lots of hateful stuff like that. So that really hit me, and obviously that was an awful thing to come across, but because that was at the very start of kind of me starting the UCL branch of the 93% Club, it really gave me more motivation to like do a lot more for this society. I mean, I was gonna do my most, but like this gave me an extra push to be like, okay, I need to really push this. At the university level, we're trying to reach out to state school level as well, like as we go on. But at the university level, what really divides kind of state school and private school students, even though they might go to the same university and have the same career ambitions, is that private school students will tend to have more resources, they'll tend to have more opportunities and more connections. So by means of the 93% Club, we are trying to give state school students these resources, opportunities, connections that private school students would have had, because no one likes to admit it, but basically every popular career path has some level of nepotism in them. So we're trying to like kind of really bridge the gap of inequalities between these two, like these two levels, different scales of education. If this were just like the 93% Club UCL by itself and we had nothing else, we wouldn't be able to like get sponsors that would be able, like corporate sponsorships that would be able to provide us with resources and opportunities. It really gives it more of a boost in our founding year.
Hearing Tania talk about the abuse on the Edinburgh 93% Club Instagram post really shocked me. From looking at some of the comments on that post myself, I realised that many people from private schools genuinely believe that being able to pay for education is a choice, rather than just a consequence of privilege. I also spoke to Neil Commin, Oxbridge tutor at Brighton, Hove and Sussex Sixth Form College, where I studied for my A-levels, about the work he is doing to help get students from state schools into top universities.
Can you tell me a bit about the work that you do at Bhasvic and the success that Bhasvic has had at getting students into Oxbridge?
So we have about 200 applications a year to Oxbridge, and we've got 160 offers in the last 3 years to Oxbridge. So that tells you roughly a hit rate of about 52, 53 students a year get in. Point being that, of course, the rest of them are going to UCL or LSE or St Andrews. We're also now the largest non-selective state school at St Andrews from England, which is quite interesting, given the fact it's also in the top 3, 5, whatever you worry about league tables. The state school figure that leading unis use is also not really truthful, because it adds in grammar schools. Now, grammar schools are far more elitist. I'm not having a view on grammar schools, I went to one, than, say, the likes of the girls' high school, in terms of you've got to pass your 11 plus, etc., etc. My view is, though, that I really do recognise that we are a relatively privileged institution. We don't attract that many working class people to Bhasvic, but I look upon us as the vanguard to begin to knock down these doors. If Bhasvic becomes the largest provider for Cambridge, that makes it easier for kids from some relatively poor comprehensive in Barrow-in-Furness or Littlehampton to get there. Yeah. Because in a sense that gap is closed somewhat. And we are breaking down that ceiling for the private school hold. So the virtue of having so many people apply is in a place like Bhasvic, which, as you know, is pretty white and middle class, really, you are always going to have kids from Lewis Priory, Dorothy Stringer, the public schools apply to Oxbridge because it's a middle class thing to do. But if you have more people apply, the ripple waves go out because it's become a normal thing to apply to Oxbridge. That makes it easier for kids from non-traditional backgrounds to apply. So we've done really well. I mean, I can't actually remember the stats for last year. The year before last, we got 28 people who are widening participation into Oxbridge. And I mean, widening participation covers a whole range of things. But, you know, we're seeing kids now from some of the weakest secondary schools in Brighton and Hove. I mean, essentially, as you would know, Mayor, the further out from the centre of Brighton you go, actually the degree of deprivation gets greater. You know, I'm not going to name the schools, but schools to the east of Brighton have quite severe challenges, and also to the west of Brighton, you know, the Portslade area, etc. And we're getting kids now, you know, from Peacehaven going to Oxford and Cambridge, and that's simply because we've expanded the number of people. It's about, in my view, normalising Oxford and Cambridge. They are merely one of 5 equal choices, and if you do that, you hit all the other Russell Group universities as well. I think also, my guess is that because we've now got 160 kids getting offers from Oxbridge in 3 years, that's rather normalised it. You know, if anybody says to me, oh, well, I'm not the right type for Oxbridge, I just said, well, you're going to say that to those 160 kids. You know, we have more kids at Cambridge than Eton does. So Cambridge is more Bhasvic than it is Eton.
Obviously, not all state sixth forms are like Bhasvic, but it's clear that the work Neil does is facilitating genuine change and paving the way for other state schools. There's evidently a huge amount of amazing work being done to increase access to higher education. But today, there are fears that the pandemic will make this work harder. As lockdown forced schools to turn to digital learning, the divide between private and state education has become even more apparent. The Sutton Trust recently reported that at private schools, 51% of primary and 57% of secondary students have accessed online lessons every day, which is more than twice as much as their counterparts at state schools. Children from wealthier families are far more likely to be able to access Wi-Fi, a computer, a place to work, and a parent who can support them. It's clear that we will feel the impact of the pandemic on children for years to come. And as we begin to move out of it, initiatives that seek to dismantle socio-economic barriers to higher education have never been more important.